we'll start off by reflecting on Man City's 2-2 draw with Crystal Palace at the weekend. So they entered that game after beating Nottingham Forest 3-0 at home just a few days earlier. A much needed result that sort of ended the 7-game winless run, but they were unable to build on that last weekend. And I think it's fair to say that, although they came from behind twice to draw against Palace, it was, a draw against a team hovering just above the relegation zone can be viewed as a bit of a disappointment. So what are your thoughts after watching City draw? What are the main things you've taken away from that match at Selhurst Park?
Yeah, it wasn't the best result. I'm not quite as negative as I thought it'd be. I think I approached it with a very sort of simple mindset at full time and asked a few questions. And if the questions were answered in a sort of fair way, then I sort of gave the team the benefit of the doubt. And one of them was, would we have lost that prior to the Forest game? And I think we probably would have actually. I do think there was a slight notable improvement in sort of resilience, maybe is the word I'm looking for, because they did go behind, twice, and each time they managed to find an equaliser. Look, I understand it's Crystal Palace. They're not exactly setting the world alight right now, but there's so much quality in the Premier League, and I do sort of subscribe to the theory that it's never been stronger between 17th to 4th. It's the levels are absolutely ridiculous. And when you look through that Crystal Palace side, even if their form hasn't been great, Eze, Mateta, Gay, Chalaboa, Will Hughes, Tyreek Mitchell. There's just so much quality. Dean Henderson in goal, they're all just brilliant players, and some of them genuinely could play in the Champions League. I really hand on heart believe that. So it's not one of those things where I'm making excuses. I'm just trying to point out that as much as where Palace are, it's sort of a false position for them. They've got a lot of quality. And I do think this game was always going to be difficult anyway, even if City were at the best. I'm sure City would have won at their very best, but Palace away, we tend to win, but it's always a bit of a battle. Selhurst Park is just such a ferocious ground. And I think when you start to add the factors out of Guardiola's current control. And I'm going to say current for a reason because there may be some things we could have addressed before the start of the season. But the current ones being he had to make multiple changes from the Forest game, and we were sort of left with a heavily rotated side again. And when you consider the injuries keep being added to, and the form is still sort of, a little bit tetchy and very much in the recovery stage, I can see why this happened, basically. So I wasn't too frustrated. It was disappointing to drop, points, but I feel like, this is step two on the sort of healing process. We're going to have to keep working our way back into form, and it's going to take time. But I can't shake the feeling that if you didn't have to make changes to a Kanji, Ake, Grealish, Doku, I think City would have won that. I really do believe that, and I think that is the crux of it, personally.
Yeah, and maybe there's a few positive things you can take away from the game. I think one of them was maybe the influence of Ruben Diaz. I think he was quite important in that game,
Yeah,
making several blocks and tackles, big impact for them. But there were still a few issues, I guess, the huge gaps between midfield and defence that we've there for all to see again. At the start of the second half, I think City was sloppy in
yeah,
possession, giving the ball away quite a lot of times, unlike the City of old. And I guess again, it was surprising maybe that Guardiola didn't make his changes earlier again.
yeah. Agree.
When City you could see that they were struggling a bit and Palace were starting to get on top. And for some reason, he decided to delay those again and until about, like final 10, 15 minutes. And for some of those, it's maybe a bit too late for them to have a real impact on the game. So a bit frustrating. Of course, the sending off of Rico Lewis, it was frustrating as well, the way it came about. Bit, harsh one really. First booking for dissent and then the second one, it seemed like 50-50 challenge and it
Yeah.
looks as if Chalobah's the one that's actually made contact with Lewis and he seems to have deceived the ref in the end by rolling around a bit. But and it's a shame for him that he'll now miss the Manchester derby because it's
Yeah.
two bookings. It
It
can't be
wasn't a second
appealed.
yellow. That it was. I mean, I
No.
can understand why someone could even argue it could still potentially be a foul, but it's not. There's no the malice in that at all, and never in a million years. He was unlucky there. I don't think he. I think Guardiola just kept saying it's Rico Lewis, and I think the point he was trying to make is that he hasn't got the character or the maybe the presence to influence a referee to trust him that way. They're going to side with the other people, and it is what it is. And I think you sort of touched on a couple of negatives, and I think the fair as well. I do think we could have made changes earlier. I wonder how much of that's Guardiola reacting to the situation and also sort of reacting to his own comments. He said prior to the game that the reason Doku and Grealish didn't play was because you could reading between the lines, you could tell he been advised not to play them because he said energy. Grealish had some struggles. Doku's recently back from injuries, and he essentially they're made of glass right now, and he just does not want to play them unless he has to. And I wish they'd come on a little bit earlier, but I don't know. Maybe they've been told they can play 15 minutes. That's
Yeah.
it. That's what they've been told by the conditioning side. And there are mistakes in that midfield. Bernardo Silva particularly culpable. It led to corner for that. Walker obviously was out jumped for, and there was a few De Bruyne, Gundogan. All these reliable players. They weren't particularly smooth on the ball every now and then. They were a little bit sloppy, and obviously you can put that down to to maybe to tiredness and fitness to an extent. Bernardo Silva just never stops playing football, and I sort of liked it as well. By the way, afterwards, that Guardiola came out and thanked Rico Lewis, Josko Vardio, Bernardo Silva, Erling Haaland, these players who play every single week. Because he's right to, and I think that was a sort of acknowledgement that their form is not the best right now, but they've got a very good reason not to be. So I think we have to consider that as well at the same time that these players are running and running and running, and therefore they're making mistakes. Kyle Walker, he's not in a very good place right now. Kyle Walker, I think we can all see it really. It's one of those things where it's if there wasn't like 2 years of sort of proof that he was sort of regressing a little bit, I think I would give him the benefit of the doubt. But he's 34 years old now, and you can just see his reaction speeds have dipped a fair bit, the way he reacts to situations, and he's not really reading things particularly well. And I think there's an element of age just catching up to him. It happens. There was always a moment where you know it gets harder and harder to maintain your levels, and I think that's where Kyle Walker's at. So essentially, there are negatives. A lot of them can be sort of explained away or excused for now. I know that sounds like I'm giving them an easy ride, but I do think they've earned the chance to have an excuse or two, or at least a little bit of patience. So as frustrating as it was, I think I'm just still very much in the mentality that there's not much we can do right now.
Yeah, now it was at this stage last season when Man City lost 1-0 away at Villa, but they went on a remarkable run then. They didn't lose any of their final 23 games en route to winning an unprecedented fourth title in a row, winning 19 of those and drawing four. I think it's difficult to see this current City side putting together a similar run, isn't it? And
Yeah.
that in mind, you think that the chances of winning the title realistically seem to be hanging by the thinnest of threads, don't they?
Yeah, Guardiola's pretty much come out and said we're going to suffer for a bit, which is not encouraging to read, but I don't think he's wrong either. I mean, until the injuries, turn around, or until we find, maybe a player or two in January, I just don't see how this is going to be anything other than a bit of a struggle. That's not to say City will carry on losing games or dropping points. They might find a way to win, but I don't think it's going to feel like what the City that we're used to or expect for some time really. And I just don't see an unbeaten run from now to the season. Not, but by no stretch can I imagine that. It's just too much. It's just too much. And every press conference is Guardiola talking about injuries, and I know everyone's got injuries, but it does feel very highly concentrated in certain areas of the pitch for City. Like we're losing defenders at an astonishing rate, and holding midfielders aren't available. Rodri and Kovacic, and there has been some mistakes, obviously, in terms of the recruitment. I think that's pretty much accepted now. I think even Guardiola would say that privately as well. But I don't think we can do this. I might be wrong. Maybe City don't have to remain unbeaten from now to the end of the season to achieve something. Maybe they don't. But I think the focus has to be more than ever the sort of cliche where Guardiola talks about just look, see what's in front of your nose and don't think too far ahead. I think it has to be that for City. They have to find a way back into form, win some games, and then just to see where they're at by the end of February. The start of March, and I think that's all City can do right now.